My name is San Lei Thang. I'm the Vice Chairman of BACI, Burmese American Community Institute. And today, I would like to introduce a wonderful and supportive senator from state of Indiana, Senator Brent Waltz. He is a long-term supporter to the Chin and Burmese community here in Indiana. It is fortunate to have him here today, and he became a senator since 2004 till today, and I would like to welcome him, and please join me in welcoming Senator Waltz. To say a few remarks.
Well, thank you so much. When Elisa, about a year ago, approached me and he had this idea, he said, I have this idea, Senator, I want to run by you. And I said, well, what okay, great. What is it? He says, I want to have a conference. And I want to have a conference of bringing government leaders of Burma, from the United States, local Burmese leaders together with Indiana leaders to be able to talk and network and develop ways that we can, as a people, move ourselves forward. And I thought it was a terrific idea. And so I'd like to thank Elisa at BACI and IUPUI, IU Kelley School of Business, for all the hard work that they've had in putting this on. And so congratulations to you all in doing that. This is my Senate district, so welcome to Senate District 36 of Indiana. And it is a great privilege and an honor for me to be able to have most of the 12,000 immigrants on the Indianapolis South Side actually in my Senate district as my constituents. Many of them are in the process of seeking their citizenship. Many are waiting to repatriate back to Burma when political conditions become perhaps a bit more stable. And we've worked very hard over the last decade getting them to work, training them, having job fairs, getting them politically active so that their voices will be heard, not just locally, but globally as well. I'd like to speak for a couple moments about maybe the American perspective of this development. And if you look over the last 70, 75 years since the end of World War II, the United States has had a fairly commanding role in world economics. That is really the historical abnormal dynamic for most countries. And there's some reasons for that. At the end of World War II, the major industrial centers of the world, Japan, the Soviet Union, Germany, Great Britain, France, had been destroyed. They'd been bombed, they'd been invaded, and most of the infrastructure in development and industry had been destroyed. Other countries, the BRICS that we know today, had not yet emerged as major economic powers. So Brazil, China, India were in the development stage. Likewise, you had the tiger economies of Korea, of Singapore, not yet quite developed either, and in many cases still under colonial rule by either the French or the British. And so during this generational shift that we saw, the United States largely controlled the infrastructure of manufacturing and technology. If somebody in France wanted to buy a washer and dryer, it was probably going to be an American washer and dryer. If somebody in Japan was going to purchase a car, it was probably going to be an American car. Again, that is not a sustainable worldview. As an American, I am not bothered by the fact that the United States is in the process of sharing the burden with this economic development. In fact, I encourage it. Because ultimately, economic disparity, economic difficulty will lead to political difficulty and inequity. So by being able to raise the standard of living of all people across the globe, I believe the United States will be safer and the world will be safer. And many of the challenges that we humans have had over the last several hundred years, the wars, the famines, the pestilence, the plagues, will largely be reduced. I'm very optimistic about the future of this country and of this world. One of the things that we've noticed over the last few years and I believe it was in the Obama administration that talked about the pivot to Asia, in particular the rapprochement with China and the redevelopment of past adversaries, such as Vietnam, for three purposes: security, economic development, and the development of democracy. And all three of these goals are certainly consistent with the short-term and long-term goals of the United States and Burma. To begin with, as we had talked about a little bit earlier, I've been able to know over the last decade many of the refugees that have come from Burma, and we've worked very closely with them. And I can tell you, I have never seen a more dynamic, stronger work ethic, a group of people who are more committed to the education of themselves and their children, and their educational, theological, and economic success. And so if that is endemic of what the Burmese people as a whole are, I believe the future will be extremely bright for the country. China, of course, has emerged as a regional power, and I believe is well on its way to becoming a global power as its economy continues to grow. But there are some challenges with this, and one only needs to look at the Spratly Islands, a few miles from the Philippines, the continuing difficulty with border disputes in Vietnam, as well as the territorial conflict with Taiwan, to know that regional partnerships and regional security measures are going to be very critical. And to this end, I believe the United States can play a very critical role in being able to counterbalance those territorial ambitions, whether they're for political purposes, resource acquisition, or simply a projection of security to a broader source. As a person who has great appreciation for Asian culture, I was a history major at Wabash College, and I had a center of concentration when it came to Asian studies. I can tell you that this type of development is certainly abnormal in terms of a rapprochement with the United States in the multi-thousand-year history of Asia. But I believe it will be one that will provide greater security to all of us in the years ahead. Lastly, there's been some discussion about infrastructure and about the way to be able to balance some of the democratic and political institutions with the economic development. And I would draw one's attention to China as an example of this. When the United States developed the telephone in 1876, the way that you communicated was by running a copper wire. You needed a lot of copper. Copper was very expensive. It was not the most efficient way, at least by modern standards, to transmit communication. Eventually, in the 1980s, fiber optic cable replaced copper wire. And so all that copper wire that people had laid down got ripped up. Again, very expensive. And people laid fiber optic cable throughout the 1980s and 1990s to every corner of the globe. Again, very expensive. Eventually, cellular phone technology became highly used. And it became cheaper to put a tower up than run the fiber optic cable. And you were able to transmit more data, more communication at a cheaper price. Now we're looking at Wi-Fi as the next step, and I have no doubt that a generation from now this will be outmoded as well. So by being able to bootstrap multiple generations of technology to current modern technology, which would be far more efficient than what our fathers or grandfathers might have enjoyed in generations past, I believe that the ability for Burma to grow as an economic engine, not just for its people, but for the world, is going to be very bright. And so again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. If there's anything that I can ever do to assist, please do not hesitate to call on me. And let's look forward to a very educational and very encouraging remainder of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.